Good afternoon and welcome to today's CFDA webinar, Deadstock, What's Old is New. I'm Sasha Brown, the Director of Professional Development at the CFDA, and it is my pleasure to lead us through this conversation. Now, there are many brands today working with Deadstock, and that has presented them with creative opportunities and solutions to sustainably manage their excess fabric inventory. Working with Deadstock also presents some challenges. And so we're thrilled to have invited three professionals from the fashion industry who will debunk myths, break down concepts, and share their insights on how they have navigated this space. Today, it is our goal to open up a dialogue with you all on how to make this method of circular design more accessible. Now, before we begin with introductions, a quick reminder that we will be hosting Q&A at the end of the hour. So feel free to submit any question you have for our speakers throughout the conversation via the Q&A tab, and we'll get to as many as we can closer to the end of the hour. Now, without further ado, I will ask each of our incredible speakers today to introduce themselves, beginning with Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here today. My name is Stephanie Benedetto, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Queen of Raw. Just a quick background. I come from a family of over 100 years in fashion and textiles, in the original Jewish garment district, the Lower East Side, grew up around the business and keyed in early on to how powerful it is, but also how wasteful and inefficient. And obviously Deadstock, which we'll talk about, doesn't make sense for people and planet, but it also doesn't make sense for businesses' profit. So wanted to build the solution. We have a platform, so anyone from a student, crafter, quilter, maker, and designer to the biggest brands and retailers of the world can reuse, resell, recycle, and donate that Deadstock. Keep it out of landfill and turn what would be pollution into profit. So excited to dive into it today.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Stephanie, and I'll pass the virtual mic over to Carrie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Freiman, and I joined Reformation in 2014 to help build the brand supply chain and sourcing strategies. And currently, as Senior Director of Sustainability, I direct programs that range from sustainable sourcing, traceability, social and environmental responsibility, and circularity within our supply chain. Reformation was founded in 2009, and our mission is to bring sustainable fashion to everyone. We set out to create a conscious brand where green fashion didn't mean compromising style. So Reformation is really about changing the world's view on the fashion industry, educating consumers about the powerful effect we can all have on the environment, and using our brand to inform the industry that it can be done in a sustainable way. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation around Deadstock.
Thank you so much, Carrie. And last but not least, Sue.
Hi, my name is Tsui Yuen-Pappas, and similar to Stephanie, I grew up in this industry. My mother was a domestic contractor here in New York, and I started my career in design. I went to Parsons and was a designer. And as the manufacturing moved from the United States to Asia, I became sort of the bridge between the manufacturers there, partly due to my language skills, but also my background understanding designers. So over the last 25 years, I've done a tremendous amount of work in the industry, in development, in production. And in that journey of being in so many factories and in so many countries, you start to see the problems. You started to see a tremendous amount of inventory of dead stock, buildups across the entire industry. So part of my move into the sustainability world, I'm now the Director of Sustainability for brand alice+olivia. And we're really looking to become part of the solution and not part of the problem in the industry. So I'm really excited today to have this discussion about Deadstock because it continues to be a large problem in our industry. And hopefully with all of us together, we can find some great solutions. And similar to Carrie, not sacrifice style or design in that process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. That was a great way to begin. So Stephanie, I'd like to start the conversation with you. Can you share an overview of the current landscape of the dead stock market? And we're so interested in learning more about how much dead stock fabric is out there, and how much does a fashion brand produce and discard of annually? And where does that go?
Yeah, that's a great question to start, because traditionally this has been a lot of dark data. People didn't know, didn't matter. We were focused on making more and new and getting it to end customers, and the stuff that was left over, a lot of companies, not everyone, but a lot didn't do anything with. So we didn't always know. But when I started looking at this issue of dead stock and waste, we knew we had to start quantifying it, figure out how much is there and is this a business opportunity? When we first started looking at the issue way back in 2014, before it became the hot topic of the day, it was $120 billion with a B worth of unused fabric that sits in warehouses collecting dust or being burned or sent to landfill annually. And as I'm sure you can imagine, through the pandemic and now with the recession, there has been a crisis of supply, more unused inventory than ever before, because there have been canceled orders, closed stores, missed seasons and collections. And so this dead stock opportunity, I like to call it, because problems, we want to turn them into opportunities, has grown to a $288 billion a year and growing problem. And I like to say that volume waste, it's not just environmentally irresponsible. This is a business financial CFO issue. But to be clear, this isn't just scraps off a cutting room floor, which a lot of people think when they first hear of it. We deal from 1 yard to tens of millions of yards of unused fabric. A lot of times in mint condition, still sealed on rolls, just looking for a purpose and a use. It's not dead, it's very much alive. So to quantify how much actually occurs, I had my own factory before Queen of Raw. And so I saw firsthand the waste, both in our business, but also in our customers' businesses. All this perfectly good stuff just sitting there, going to be burned or landfilled. So we went out and we worked with bankers and research analysts and Messe Frankfurt, who runs Texworld and others. And we did a survey. And we realized that on average, 15% of every single step of every production run ends up as waste. Now, I say that's an average. Many can do better. We saw as low as 5 to 6%, and then some were worse. We saw as high as 35+%. But the average was 15%, and at every single step. That's a lot of waste, but a lot of opportunity. And obviously, traditionally, this stuff just sits there or goes to jobbers and middlemen, right, for pennies. And how do you all get access to it? And that's really was kind of our point of view, and where we thought there was a massive opportunity to help take this stuff and take action on it, and give businesses an opportunity to save and make a lot of money while doing it, which I'm sure we'll unpack.
Incredible. So helpful to understand kind of the landscape in the context of this huge segment of the market. So Carrie, let's bring this over to you. And someone who works for Reformation, one of the first American fashion brands to work with Deadstock, I'd love to learn more about how and why that journey began for the brand. And then also how Deadstock plays a role in your current design and production process.
Yeah, great question. So for some context on the brand first launched in 2009 with the idea of reforming clothes and finding outdated vintage pieces like slips and blazers and revamping them in the back room sewing shop of our first store on the Lower East Side. So it's definitely, part of the brand from the beginning. And today, we combine stylish, vintage-inspired designs with sustainable practices, and release limited edition collections in low-impact materials, including Deadstock. So we have a vintage-only Reformation store in Los Angeles, and sell one-of-a-kind vintage in our Lower East Side store in New York City still, as well as Shoreditch in London. So the ethos of reuse is still a very powerful message here at Reformation. We buy vintage garments in bulk, things like jeans, cashmere sweaters, and then sort, wash, and retailer them, and also source one-of-a-kind vintage pieces that we sell in our stores. For Deadstock, currently about approximately 7% of our total fabric uptake in 2022 was Deadstock. And it's something that we intend to grow over time. We're looking at a goal of 10%. So it's really been part of our strategy from the beginning. And it's really exciting to see that other brands are now exploring how they can use Deadstock as well.
Amazing. Sorry, it takes me forever to unmute myself. I apologize. And Sue, I'd love for you to share more about your work at alice+olivia and working with Deadstock, and share more about how COVID-19 and the pandemic throughout that obviously presented so many challenges for brands of all sizes, but how it also created an opportunity for alice+olivia.
For sure. I think every brand with COVID faced cancellations, as we mentioned earlier. But what we did here was we sat down and we devised a strategy. And I think that's really important for any company, whether you're a billion-dollar company or a small startup. You really need to look at your situation and identify those places that you can have a win. So we developed this strategy here. We broke down our Deadstock. First of all, I'm going to preface with that alice+olivia, we do something here which a lot of companies should adopt, which is we cut to sales. We really work hard to do that without the fear that, oh, I'm not going to be able to cover a sale or I'm going to lose a sale. I think that strategy is part of the reason why we have such an inventory problem in the industry to begin with. So when we looked at our liability that was a result of COVID, the first thing we did was we looked at all the fabrics that were not shipped. We wanted to see, if any of it was relevant for future seasons. So we isolated those fabrics. We made sure design was aware of them so that they can basically use those in the next up and coming collections. So that was a really easy thing to do. The second thing we did was we looked at fabrics that had longevity, things like tweeds or solids, and can be used, perhaps in a more immediate outcome. So we took those things and we started to think about how can we create items that were in demand when the retailers reopened, things that were jackets or blazers or occasion dresses that we suddenly got feedback from sales saying, hey, people are back out. They want to, they have weddings to attend to. So we then isolated those fabrics into cutting those specific things for those customers. Then we looked at the things that were really challenging, like things that were very seasonal. They might be a texture or a Swiss dot that was high summer, and here we were in the middle of winter. And we started to say, okay, what can we do with these fabrics? What we did was we started to look for margin builder packages with specific retailers so that we can, again, offer some more exclusive product for them to kind of tackle that. And alice+olivia is known for its prints and its colors. So, those are very specific. So we really wouldn't be able to integrate that into future collections. So what we did there, we are lucky enough to have our own retail stores as well. So what we did was we started looking at some of our best-selling bodies that could translate well into those fabrics or prints. And we developed, we went in and cut into those styles specifically for our own retail stores or retail opportunities. So I think having a strategy when you take this huge amount of fabric that you might have on hand and breaking it down strategically into different buckets, it really makes it much more easy to digest, not from an aesthetic standpoint, but from a dollar and from a yardage perspective as well.
Thank you, Sue. Now, I think it would be interesting for the audience to also understand externally if you're sourcing dead stock. Stephanie, Carrie, feel free to chime in here. How do fashion brands source dead stock, and what ways can they ensure it is dead stock? And then, are there certain standards that dead stock fabric has to meet in order to be upcycled?
Excellent question. When we first started looking at this opportunity around dead stock, we did look for that. What are the rules when something becomes a liability, waste, excess inventory, dead stock? And we found that although businesses have rules and requirements internally for finance and legal, there wasn't really an industry standard there. And we took the business rules that our clients have, and we applied that to how we vet, measure, and report the dead stock. So with our software, we are able to identify what is dead stock, and we do that with a number of criteria based on when was it made, why was it made, how long has it been sitting, where is it sitting, who does it come from, and who does it go to, and for what purpose it is used. And of course, every business may have slightly different time periods, slightly different requirements, but we are working now to codify that industry standard so that the industry can come together. We can identify as a team cohesively what that means, and then everyone can have that certificate, that seal, that stamp of approval that it was dead stock because it met that criteria. What's interesting about dead stock, and when we look with our partners, the factories, the mills, the brands and retailers across industries that we work with who want to leverage our solution and take action on their dead stock, reselling it isn't always what they want to do. And I mention that because of course we're here and you want access to that dead stock, and we want to give you the marketplace and the market to be able to get this first-rate quality vetted dead stock. But sometimes we encourage companies to reuse it internally. Now that you know about it, can you send it to a different department and division to reuse internally, kind of what you were just hearing with Sue, and think differently about how you use that. If you're not going to reuse it, yes, resell it, great, save, make some money, free up that warehouse space, it's very valuable. But sometimes you can't resell it, it's proprietary, past a shelf life, needs to be gone yesterday. Can you donate it? And last case, do you need to recycle it? And we walk them through that priority so you really get the best use case you can out of that dead stock. And I think that's important to think about. But just one thing I want to call out, but I know a lot of people here think when they think dead stock, it scraps off a cutting room floor, it's damaged, it's seconds, it's past a shelf life. Working with us, that is not the case. We only would resell to you and others high quality, first rate, vetted, certified dead stock. That's very important to us, and it's important, I think, to the industry to actually be able to use this in a valuable manner. So we have our criteria. We hope to be able to give all of you the stamp and seal of approval, and provide platforms like ours to have a marketplace where you can quickly and easily come in, find what you need, when you need it, at a discount, and located away from an area maybe impacted by disruption. So that's really been our goal and our spirit and ethos from the beginning.
Carrie, do you have anything else to add just about how Reformation is sourcing their dead stock?
Yeah, I think Stephanie made a great point that there is no, I think, industry definition for dead stock. So I think that's something that, we all need to hold hands and make sure we're all talking the same language. So at Reformation, we just define dead stock as old, leftover, and over-ordered fabric from other designers, fabric warehouses, and we have a verification process in place to ensure that our purchase does not result in further reorders of the fabric and that the fabric has indeed been aging. So our process includes an agreement that asks for information, again, to Stephanie's point, like how long a fabric has been aging, why has it been aging, where is it sitting? We ask for any supporting documentation that they can provide as well. And then additionally, we reconcile any used dead stock against the total amount of dead stock that the vendor started with, so we can kind of continuously monitor that usage. I think it's also really important to train suppliers on how we define dead stock and how to identify it to kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page.
That's a really good point too. A lot of times early on in this movement, I think people didn't know how to deal with dead stock? How to your point, Carrie, how to define it? And even as a designer or creator, how do you actually use it and integrate it into your design practices? What happens if there isn't any more available, or what do I do? And so these are all things that we've spent a lot of time in how we try to package our solution, where we actually drive as a project management tool, you finding what you want in dead stock, all the way to your design teams sampling it, testing it, producing it, and then holding it for reorders for certain time periods. So we really want to be able to have you at any size brand or retailer integrate this into your design practice. So just know that it's possible. We can dive into it more, but it is very, for a small designer to the biggest companies in the world who we work with, the world's largest retailers and Fortune 500 brands, you can use this at scale or small, and it's available for you.
For sure.
Go ahead, Sue, sorry.
I think for many brands, it's really important, like Stephanie mentioned, to really know where your stock is being held, the conditions it's held in. A lot of the times, we leave it up to our factories, and they can, the worst thing you could do is have goods that, aren't kept in proper conditions, because then they're not useful. So I think for us, we're monitoring all of those processes all the time. We have monthly reviews of where those materials are, what they are, the values, and it's really a practice of with your mills as well. As far as sourcing, sometimes, having those relationships with the manufacturers, there may be available goods. We always issue POs, and we issue POs against something, and the mill's not going to necessarily say, hey, we have something similar, you can have better delivery on it, if you just issue them a PO for something specific. So it's having those conversations, and it creates this whole dialogue of, okay, this is almost like 99% identical to what I have, and I can get a much better delivery on it. It's going to fill my orders, but I don't necessarily have to go and weave another 2,000 yards of something. So it's really about communication with all your supply chains.
Great points to bring up. And Stephanie, I had this later in the conversation, but you brought it up, and I want to go deeper into it. And you said that you can use dead stock at scale. Can you dive deeper into that?
Absolutely. There is this feeling, as I mentioned, that it's scraps or it's 1 or 2 meters. And of course, that is absolutely a part of this, and that is available to you. But I think early on, there was this myth or assumption, a couple myths and assumptions. One is that being circular or sustainable was automatically going to cost you more money. And I think we've shown here with Deadstock that it can actually save and make you money while doing good. And we can talk about how we measure the doing good impact side of it. But that was one myth. And the other myth was that, this is only good for pilot projects, little eco-conscious collections in one little location around the world. And what we've really spent a lot of time trying to show, and why we have gone after democratizing access for everyone to participate with our solution, and working with the biggest brands and retailers in the world, is to show that this is truly automated and scalable, that there is tens of millions to hundreds of millions to billions of dollars worth and yardage worth of perfectly good fabric readily available for consumption. And this can meet your testing requirements, your certifications, and your design practices. So, in terms of some of the case studies we've seen, just one of the world's largest retailers who we work with wants to buy and use our platform for sourcing large volumes of dead stock. In doing so, we are now working on the final case study and audited numbers, but they've saved up to 60% of their material costs by doing this, and while also reducing their carbon footprint, have increased their speed and time to market. And so I think those are really unique and valuable points to see that even for the biggest companies in the world, whether you want to go start your own or you're working with one of the larger ones, it is possible to be done. Of course, we can leverage technology like blockchain, like machine learning, like our software and marketplace in order to do this at scale. But just know and trust that the volume, the inventory, the accessibility, it is out there, and some really awesome materials that can push design in a totally new way while also being environmentally and economically affordable and available. So that, that's just one example. To give you on the flip side, one of the Fortune 500 fashion brand we work with, just through reselling and recycling initiatives with us, they were able to take action on over 12 metric tons of dead stock, diverted 95% from landfill and incineration, and saved millions of dollars in holding costs alone on this stuff. So just to show the scope and the scale of this around the world that we can act on.
Incredible. I want to pivot the conversation, and I want to open this up to all of you to contribute to. Maybe Carrie, I'll look to you first. Can you talk about the consumer perception of dead stock or upcycled clothing?
Yeah, so we've always taken a design first approach to sustainability. So on the whole, customers come to us first and foremost for beautiful clothing and stay when they learn about our practices. So while many deeply know and love the ins and outs of our operations, some are much less familiar. And we take that as a compliment, of course, that we're striking kind of the right balance of driving sustainable fashion forward and producing things that people really want to wear. But we really think that consumers have always been drawn to dead stock, partly due to kind of the scarcity, right? It's limited edition. For the most part, and it means lower impact and reducing waste. So, consumer perception, I'd say it's positive. It's something to talk about and share the story.
Yeah, I think jumping in on that as well, I think our customer looks at the style, looks at the fashion, looks at the fun of it. And I think it's up to us as a design house and as designers to really find the appropriate uses of that so that it's fresh and it looks good for the customer, so that it's almost like the perception isn't there that it's limited or it's, dead stock. I think that's been most successful for us, to really use it in a way that the consumer, we only buy quality goods. We only buy, certain things of a higher level. So for us, it shouldn't have that negative connotation ever at all for our customers.
I think it's been fascinating to see, with everything going on in the world, the huge opportunity that it has had for our industry. And I always say, I don't know, if not for what we've all gone through together, that we would have had this kind of adoption and understanding of why the circular economy matters so much and why the opportunities like working with Deadstock are so powerful. When we first started looking at this issue, we knew there were going to be companies that want to sell it and make money. Was anyone going to buy this stuff? That was a big question of ours. And so we really quickly, when Queen of Raw was just a marketplace, put up our marketplace back in 2018 to test. And the amount of consumer demand and inquiries, obviously a testament that we're all here and you're all here, but was through the roof. We didn't have to pay a penny in PR marketing or advertising. And now we're over 500,000 users and growing around the world. So the demand is there. And I think that's been really helpful to also then get the big companies to want to adopt this solution, because they see that you are demanding it, you want it, you need it, and you're willing to pay with your dollars for it. I'll give you one quick use case of customer sentiment. One of our clients, one of our Fortune 500 clients, saw 3 times the conversion rate in their online direct consumer business, just by talking about the work they were doing with circular economy and Deadstock in particular. 3x their conversion rate. So those are powerful numbers to show. And I think this is just the beginning of what we're going to see coming out of this.
It's amazing to hear. Now, again, this is for anyone, we work in an industry where the demand for newness from consumers is almost insatiable. And you can see that from the data that's coming out from these multi-billion-dollar fast fund companies. fast fashion companies. So with, new products, new design, new fabrications, how can we ensure that Deadstock is addressing this as a solution for this demand for newness?
I think it goes back to what I mentioned before. We challenge our design teams. We challenge them on how they design things. So, I mean, yes, the fabrications maybe vary season to season if it's prints and things like that, but your core fabrics are your core fabrics at the end of the day, and the newness comes from design. So we really focus on design, similar to Reformation. It's all about the design, and you'll always be able to find some fabric in Deadstock that suits those needs.
Yeah, I think that's when we look at the profile and the materials that are trending and what people are buying and what's available across our exchange. Of course, we have some of the more unique and certified and quote unquote sustainable fibers and all this stuff. But then, of course, we have plenty of white fabric, plenty of black fabric, plenty of cotton, plenty of polyester, even grayish, which we can talk about, which is a unique case. But there are opportunities for this Deadstock for you to apply your own patching and design and prints and dyes to make it your own and do something with it. And it is new. This is not post-consumer. This is first rate in condition stuff. And by saving all the money that you save leveraging Deadstock, you have more capital in order to be able to put in making more creative design decisions, appliques, trims, and accessories. So I think it only amplifies creativity and design in a really cool way. And it gives you that great story to tell, of course, to your customers.
Now I'm getting a few text message questions that I want to just work into the conversation about specifically for Carrie and Sue, how your Deadstock strategy is going to play, or maybe not play, a further role in your sustainability goals for the near future.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's always in our immediate sustainability goals, because that's one of the things is to not create a tremendous amount of dead stock in a company like Alice+Olivia. So some of the things we do internally are technology based. We have had for over a decade Gerber technology that we implement in our production to really maximize the utilization of all our materials. So, there's definitely, it's part of our sustainability goals. It's always reviewed and we pivot, so I think it's just part of our DNA to always look at it and make sure that it's part of our entire process.
Yeah, I think for Reformation, we made a commitment to be climate positive by 2025. And we're defining this as meeting science-based reduction targets and removing more emissions than we produce. So basically, as we grow, we'll work to cut our emissions by about half across our operations and within our supply chain. And of course, the materials that we use, play a major role in the total impact of our products. And to become climate positive by 2025, we're really making sure that the materials we use reduce emissions and help us to shrink our sourcing footprint. So we have our own Reformation fiber standards that are, as holistic as possible. So we take into considerations like water input, energy input, land use, greenhouse gas emissions. We also look at garment care implications like microfiber shedding, as well as the potential for circularity. And about 95% of our current fabric sourcing for apparel meets our top ratings, and Deadstock, of course, is included as a top rated fabric. So we're really focused on shifting away from virgin fibers. So for example, like sourcing more recycled cotton versus organically grown cotton. And we're setting more goals around maximizing sourcing of recycled next generation and Deadstock materials in order to meet our climate positive and circularity goals. I can give you a few of our goals around that. So by 2025, we're looking to have 50% of our materials be from deadstock, recycled, or next generation content. And we're also working towards 100% of our products to be designed, developed, and manufactured using circularity principles by 2030. And that's really so they can effectively be disassembled, remade, or recycled. So it's definitely very core to our strategy as a business.
It's been awesome to see, obviously, with all the consumer demand that we talked about, but also the regulatory landscape right now, that companies are incentivized, not just because of the environmental and economic opportunities of getting to zero waste or as close as possible, but because obviously the laws are requiring it. And they are mandated by law to reduce their waste, to measure and report on it. I think that's what my company as a technology company wants to empower all of you to have, is access to the data and the footprint of what you have in Deadstock, what you do with it, and then how to measure and report on the good work you do. We spent the past 2 years with MIT and the United Nations building out an algorithm so anyone across our exchange can measure, based on the good work they do, the water, the chemicals, the carbon emissions, the waste, and the dollars saved by the activities and the actions they take. The company can know, and the end consumer who actually purchases your clothing out of Deadstock fabric can scan that QR code and see that. And obviously there's blockchain to it, so there's a lot of integrity to the data, but measuring and reporting and proving that this is Deadstock and now it's in your hands, and the power that you just had being a part of this solution. I think that's so important. There's an awesome question. I don't mean to be jumping ahead, but I'm smiling because we get asked this all the time. Well, if you're giving businesses a place to resell, recycle, reuse, and donate waste, are you just incentivizing them to make more waste because they have a place to put it? We get asked that all the time. And I honestly love that question, because at the end of the day, waste, inefficiency, unused materials is one of the most expensive things to do as your business. It makes zero business sense. There's the cost of the wasted materials. There's also personnel to manage it, warehouse space for years it's tying up, depreciation and value of the goods, insurance to manage the goods. For every $1 of unsold inventory, you got to slap like another $1.40 domestically on top of it every year in holding costs. That's a ton of money. And so for businesses to keep making this waste and then sell it at a discount or recycle it or donate it makes no business sense. So we actually track in our software whether you're increasing or decreasing in your amount of Deadstock over time, so that you can, now that you have what we talked about was dark data brought to light, you can intelligently minimize your waste going forward, because it makes good business sense. Put aside this, circular economy and sustainability. It just is the way good business is done. So it's something we hold very near and dear. And we also are looking at, now that you have all these key supply chain partner, value chain partners in our software taking good actions, can you as a business incentivize them for doing that good work? Being a part of that solution and that impact, can you reward them economically or in other ways? And so that is absolutely a part of our solution, something we're looking at. So we're all part of the solution together and get opportunities to take part in it.
Amazing. I do want to, since Stephanie, you are talking about, you did talk about measuring your footprint and the impact. I want to get to one question to keep talking about that. And it's in regards to, if you're sourcing Deadstock externally, how do you correctly measure its footprint if you don't know what its history is?
Well, just to be clear, at least for what we measure and report on, we are not saying that exact fabric that you buy from farm to finished good has this impact. That's not my business. There are companies who do that. That's not what we're saying. I want to be very clear. What we are saying is, by rescuing a yard of that 100%, organic cotton, as opposed to it going to landfill and incineration, you have just saved this amount of water, chemicals, carbon emissions, waste, and dollars from a like 1 yard of that fabric being made new. So I just want to be very clear. That is how we measure and report what has been saved and how we are tracking. We actually want to bring down the rate of textile waste from textile production. That's what we measure and report on. So, for anyone who wants to participate, we have our algorithm. We are continuing to open up access to it. And I'm happy to chat with anybody deeper about how we think about it. It is something that we are now going through third-party audits for, and will be a part of that industry standard that we're all working together towards.
Amazing. And we'll make sure to share everyone's information following in any resources that are accessible to you. And I want to get to the end of the conversation just so we can start addressing some of the questions that are coming in. So this is for all, and I know the answer, but in your opinion, is working with Deadstock an accessible method of design for brands of all business sizes, from emerging to marquee?
Yeah. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So I think yes. I do think for larger, for brands producing larger quantities, depending on the amount of deadstock they can find, production and design methods might need to shift. So for example, designing, as we talked about with deadstock, can place limitations on the designer's vision. But at the same time, it can also ensure that they have to think more creatively because they're going to have to design with that fabric on hand. So I think, from a production and marketing perspective, quantities most likely would be lower, depending again on the size of the brand, due to that fabric availability, which also might require suppliers and brands to work together to, work on lower MOQs, for example.
Yeah, I think similar to what Carrie just said, you really need to approach it differently. It can't be the same model. I'm going to make this, I'm going to show it to all these retailers and see what orders come in. I think it's a much more measured approach, and I think it could work successfully for an emerging brand or an established brand. It's just that, you go into it knowing exactly how much you can produce, and then finding the right partners for that product. I think it's more the approach.
And there's some great kind of cross-industry collaborations and consortiums and partnerships that before the pandemic were convening in person. We're now virtual and now going back to in person. For anyone based in New York City, we're part of the New York Circular City Initiative with H&M, Unilever, Cisco, Goldman Sachs, Ellen MacArthur, and a bunch of others. And we came together to talk about what it would look like for New York City to go circular in the coming years. And of course, fashion is a big piece of that, and how we can have solutions for the deadstock and waste created within New York City, but also around the world. And at the end of the day, we created a white paper, which anyone can read, showing how many good jobs could be created, how much money could be saved and made by working with deadstock, and a whole host of course, other solutions that were encompassed in it. So feel free to check out that report. These, I think, show practices that any of us as an end consumer or an individual, but also the biggest companies in the world can participate in this, leverage these kinds of solutions, take action on deadstock, and build for that awesome future. And, as we think about the future of this industry, I'm sure everyone can speak to just as well, if not better than I can, but there is this movement to more on-demand, local, digital, and sustainable, and deadstock is a key part of that.
Perfect. So speaking of the future, moving forward, I want to broaden this a bit more, maybe outside of deadstock, but core to the CFDA's work in sustainability. We're so focused on material innovation, such an important facet of circular design. So I'd love to just get all your thoughts on if there are any types or material innovations that are inspiring or exciting you working at your brands, or Stephanie working in the industry, that will help us move towards a more circular industry.
Yeah, I can get us started. So, we believe that the future of fashion is circular, and making something new shouldn't have to mean using virgin materials. So we're super excited about the next gen materials out there, especially those materials that can be used in a closed loop. This is an area that we've invested heavily in. We are members of Fashion for Good. That's an innovation platform with a lot of other brands. And over the last 12 months, we introduced actually 9 material innovations at scale to help mitigate this impact and solutions for kind of long-standing industry change. So one of those, for example, is Naya Renew. It's a fiber made from 60% wood pulp and 40% recycled plastic. We introduced that as a silk alternative. Another one would be a recycled cashmere, 90% recycled cashmere and 10% wool for sweaters. And I think it's important to note that like when we introduce new collections, they are not capsule collections. They are their core fabrications for the brand moving forward. And, hopefully more brands will adopt that and not just have, one collection for a short amount of time. And I think that, we see an opportunity in collaborating with like-minded brands and suppliers and other stakeholders to try and overcome circularity challenges and create innovative solutions. So as we consider how to lead, bigger shifts within the industry, I think the next step really is to move beyond just thinking about what we do with used clothing and dead stock fabrics. We need to start thinking about the potential for circularity in fibers, dyes, and garments, so we can create a more, holistic system really to begin with.
Thank you, Carrie.
There's a lot of incredible innovations going on out there, and thrilled to partner and support with a number of them. Another question we often get asked is, how could you be sustainable? You've got synthetics and leathers and skins on your platform. And we do. It doesn't mean it's for everybody. But if I can measure and report on the impact of rescuing that and keeping it out of landfill and keeping it in circulation longer, to Carrie's point, in a more circular way, that to us is a measurable impact. Doesn't mean you need to buy it or use it in your collection, but there is demand there, and we can bring down the rate of textile production of some of those synthetics and leathers and skins by doing that. At the same time, we very much want to be a part in the future of building that future that Carrie was describing, where we are using more natural materials, more recyclable materials. So, we've done a lot of work in the EU with a grant around that and some incredible innovations for bio-based materials. We have done a lot here domestically with looking at microfiber shedding with some great partners like Under Armour, and investing in solutions that really get rid of that problem as well. So we want to be a key part of all the solutions. Obviously, we have focused on dead stock, but ultimately, do we dream of a world where there is no more dead stock and waste? You bet. We got a while to get there, but we'll get there.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot of exciting innovations happening right now. I think for us as a brand, that's the biggest part of my job that I enjoy, which is seeking out those innovations and looking how they can be adopted into our programs and in how we could use it in its most effective way. But like Stephanie mentioned, it would be great to get to a place where that's the ultimate solution. But right now we still are faced with so much of dead stock that's available to us. A situation was I was in China just pre-pandemic, and I walked into a leather manufacturer, and he took me, I started talking to him about sustainability, and he took me into a room, and it was the size of like a small warehouse, and he's like, this is all the leftover from all the brands I work with. There's got to be a way to leverage, like Stephanie, all of this so that I don't have to keep adding to it, because he's like, I don't want the storage. You guys are so siloed as individual brands, but if you can collectively come together, I think that's an innovation that we need to implement more, that we're sharing in all these resources so that we can stop being so siloed and keep adding to the problem.
These are all, you've already addressed half the questions, but we have so many questions coming in that I want to now transition to the Q&A, a few of which are directed to specific panelists, and others I'd love for the group to speak to. So our first one, I think, is actually for Sue. You did talk about leadership support. the beginning or the middle of the conversation. So one of our attendees is interested if you can share best practices in terms of leadership support of Deadstock use. So are designers or merchandisers getting bonuses tied to their support of this initiative? Is there optimal organizational strategy to implement this?
We're very unique in that, we do have a structure in our company that, you share in the company's profitability. So therefore, yes, absolutely. If our bottom line looks better because we have less inventory and we're utilizing it and, we're getting better margins. Yes, everyone is rewarded in that structure. So I do encourage other companies to do that as well, because that does incentivize people to, not be out of mind, out of sight, out of mind scenario. So yes, for sure, there's incentives.
This question is for Stephanie. You mentioned that we were talking about the $280 billion market at the beginning. This attendee is curious what percentage of the $280 billion market is usable or resellable versus needs to be recycled or donated.
Love that question. We are going to be putting out a report along with this industry standard that speaks more to that. So I am going to say right now it depends, because different businesses, especially brands and retailers, have different rules, legal rules, security rules of when and how something can be acted on. So although a very large percent of that happens to be good quality, there are reasons that it may not be able to be resold and has to be recycled or donated. So once we go through this industry standard and the codification of these processes, we will come up with a report and come back to you more specifically. But on the flip side of the question is there enough good stuff out there to use? Let me tell you, for one huge fashion brand we work with, in the past 3 months alone, we just found for them 20 million meters of first-rate certified, tested, perfectly good fabrics to be used. So the volume is out there too, but I'll be able to speak more articulately in the coming year as we get that data finalized and audited.
That's great. There was a follow-up to that question. It's different, and maybe Carrie or Sue, you can address it, but when you're working with Deadstock, are you able to refinish it, re-dye it, manipulate it in any type of way?
There is some Deadstock that's grayish, and I think Stephanie was going to mention that, but I'd say we haven't come across it very much. So with that, you could finish and dye. I think, I see another question too, like about testing it. So that is definitely a challenge, because for us, you want to make sure that Deadstock fabrics, right, meet chemical regulations as well as quality standards to ensure that durability and potential for circularity. And because there can be so much inconsistency and variability out there, especially if you're working with jobbers. But then you have the issue sometimes if you do the testing, and then you wait too long, it's gone. So that is definitely a real challenge, and something that we faced, and sometimes the designers have to kind of shift what fabric they're going to use, right?
The flip side, just really quickly, we do hold licenses, testing reports, certificates, and inventory can be held for a reasonable time period. So you can draw down on that, you can test, so there are now solutions like ours that will help you do that. But to Gary's point, I mean, it does need design and everybody on board, but you get those commitments and it's possible.
Yeah, and to that question, I think it depends on what the product category is. In denim, it's not a problem. You could change the wash, you can do all kinds of things to Deadstock denim, which actually is kind of amazing. So, yes, certain fabrics with its finishes, you have to work within those parameters, but it all depends on the product category.
So I'm glad we received this question, because what makes up so much of the CFDA community are small to medium-sized businesses, emerging designers. So our next question is, what advice do you have for emerging brands who focus on sustainability and lower MOQs when trying to reach out and secure wholesale accounts? I run into a handful of roadblocks with retailers, small or large, when it comes to one-offs or even smaller MOQs with about 10 pieces per side, because buyers have said that they don't want to pay the wholesale cost of a lower MOQ. Does anyone want to?
Yeah, it's a great question. And prior to working at Reformation, I actually had my own sustainable women's wear line. So I definitely know where this person's coming from. I would say, I think it sounds from your question like maybe the retailer is concerned that you're passing on that premium to them for producing the MOQ. So perhaps you could speak with your supplier, like maybe if you're working with a lot of different colorways, you could find Deadstock with, in a few different colorways, or they could produce, maybe they do like one run of one fabric and another, so you can increase that overall quantity and negotiate more with them. And on the other side, I would think is to really educate the retailer. And we do a lot of this too, and engage to ensure that they understand, the reasoning and importance of using Deadstock.
Yeah, I think that question also is trying to fit within the traditional retail model, which has its challenges because of limited MOQs and quantities. So I do think what's exciting is there's a lot new models out there, and using Deadstock, I think you need to also connect with those models that really look at the limited quantities as a plus and not as a negative. I think is really more the way you need to approach it as a smaller brand.
That's what I was going to say. So many new business models, new marketplaces and platforms, new supply chain partners who work with this, vendors like us.
That's great feedback. We have time for one more question. For those that we couldn't get to, I see you, and I'll try and get feedback and resources to you in follow-up. The last question, so this is again for someone who runs a smaller business. The location of Deadstock always poses a challenge for them when it comes to possible higher ship costs to get the fabrics to factory producing the finished goods. How can smaller businesses take advantage of this given the challenge?
I would think that, it's about trying to source a Deadstock close to where you're manufacturing. And I would say the first step is to speak with your supplier, as well as your mill, to see if they have anything that you can use, and to build that kind of localized supply chain.
Yeah, there's a ton of Deadstock out there. We are mapping and tracing where in the world it sits, so you can start to geolocate. But there are other platforms, our marketplace is not the only marketplace. Our software is different, but our marketplace is not. And I'm happy to share resources and tools with the CFDA to share with you about platforms like ours and around the world that can support you in the search of this. The goal being to get you access to materials that otherwise, would be burn or landfill, and hopefully do it at a discount, low minimums, and where you need it. So any way we can help, even beyond our platform, we're here.
Thank you. That's so generous, Stephanie. And we're at time, and I just want to extend my hugest gratitude to Stephanie, Carrie, and Sue for leading this conversation with us. I know there's so much more we have to tackle, and we'll promise to share as much as we can with our CFD community. But once again, thank you so much for joining us today. Please stay tuned for recording, for resources, for email address. We promise to get those to you. And I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The world.
Thank you. Bye.